Welcome to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV. And Mike, listen, as we get into and get prepared for what can only be an amazing 2023.
There has to be. There's only one way we can go from here, and that's up.
Absolutely.
And we want to take a little look back on 2022. We had a little chat last night, some of the things we want to inject in here today. And I think let's go right back to the beginning of the year.
Okay, I want to make a pledge, though. I do want to make a pledge, Mike. I think that there are plenty of people who would say to me, I'm going to turn the channel if you make me relive too much of 2022.
Oh, we're not going to.
And we're not going to do that.
Every cloud has a silver lining, and we're very good at plucking those silver linings out. So
we are.
There is hope, so stay tuned because we will give you that hope, and you'll come away from this like you'd been at a Tony Robbins seminar, I guarantee it. So, but to start with,
you heard it here first.
Let's go back to January, February 2022. That is when the market pretty much peaked. And that peak came at the tail end of 2 years of relative insanity.
I see how this show is going to go, Mike. I see how this show is going to go already.
Okay.
Because you said this is the point when the market peaked.
Yeah.
My interpretation, if we can get Rogers to put some closed captioning or whatever, maybe the thought bubble for RF here, it's going to be, and that is when the central bank and the government decided that they were going to manipulate the market and make it tank.
And we'll get into that. That frustrates the hell out of me. I'm sorry, I gotta say it as bluntly as I can. In that, we were at a point where the government was looking at just a rampant economy that had been going, housing prices that had been going through the roof, and again, they peaked around that time, and it was leaving a lot of people out of the game. And the government figured they had to step in, as they always do, and kind of stifle some of that activity because it was going to evolve into inflation that was going to take us places they did not want to go. I truly believe, though, and I can't know this, I'm not an economist, but everything I've seen about the real estate market, at least in the last 22 years, tells me that this would have leveled out on its own. Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
There's only so far you can go, and then reality sets in, and there's only so far that the banks are going to allow you to go just through the process that they have in place already without having to raise rates.
So at the risk of agreeing with you,
no, we can't have that.
No, we can't have that. I'm going to do something that also makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm going to reference the CBC for a moment.
Okay.
Because that is not something I always do, but I do put them in my mix, and I want to be fair.
Well, they're there. They have a perspective. Yeah.
I pretty much I do my best to not discount anybody, and I have to decide what I want to.
You can't always go to Conrad Black for your higher knowledge.
No, and I definitely don't do that. But anyway, so I'll leave that thought alone. But they have a great article in the CBC as of yesterday, December. Well, I'm sorry for time stamping this, but December 6th. Yeah, and it's an article from the CBC by Don Pittis, and he basically references right here. He says central bankers have to make hard decisions, and sometimes they get it very wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm really refreshed by that article. I'm refreshed by that statement, and that is just a headline. You got to read the entire article. But here's the reality. The reality is that nobody has a crystal ball. We know that.
No.
And the reality is hindsight is 2022, as we say, or 2020 in general.
Yeah.
We know that as well. However, when you are, and you said you're not an economist, sometimes we play economists on TV, though, a little bit. We reference that. We do our best to do the homework and to look at data.
We try to pay attention.
You got to look at the data. And when you're in a position of influence, when you're in a position where there is a fiduciary responsibility to do what is in the best interest of the public, but there is outside influence and there is political pressure, and that is a reality. I don't care what anybody says, and I don't care which party is in power. There's always people who are providing guidance and providing influence and helping shape policy. The reality is, though, what we're looking at in 2022 and going into 2023 is the result of a series of that guidance, a series of manipulation, a series of adjusting the dial to
Artificially
try and
tweaking?
make things
Yeah.
as soft as they possibly can be. And what we're looking at today, Mike,
But did they overreach? Did they overshoot?
absolutely they overreached.
I mean, I
And
look
that
at the analogy, and I probably used it here before, is like government and I guess the central bank to some degrees with regards to this analogy. It's like a boat. And or I think I've used the analogy, it's like a plane. A plane needs to go from A to its destination B. It is off course 99.9% of the time in that flight. It corrects to the right, it corrects to the left, corrects to the right, corrects to the left, and it eventually ends up at its target. But it's never directly on course. Government operates that way. I think our central bank and our economy operates that way. We go too far one way, they correct their steering, and it unfortunately takes us too far the other way, and they have to recorrect. Because if you look just a year and a half ago, they were throwing billions of dollars.
Well, that's my point.
Billions and billions of dollars, and less than a year later, they're letting the air out of the tires, and they want to stop us and correct us the other way.
They're clawing back the billions of dollars. So I'm gonna follow my train of thought though, and I want you to stick with me just for this. All right. So the reality is that Tiff Macklin, at the head of the Bank of Canada, absolutely missed the mark, and he allowed influence from outside pressures. He allowed outside pressures to influence his decision making. The reality is he should have made moves at the central bank at inching up rates years ago. And when I'm saying years ago, at least 5 years ago. It would have been okay 3 years ago, and it didn't have to be by a lot. The reality is there is an equilibrium. There is a point where we have to pay to borrow money. You know what I mean? And then when you get below that, right, where banks have to pay to borrow the money, right, and they offset that and they pass that on to the borrower. But there is a point where there is a sort of a break-even point on that cost of borrowing, and it's somewhere around the 3% mark. But we've been hovering around less than 1%, right?
Well,
for
and
way
where are
too
we
many
today?
years.
Last you checked.
Well, I think we're around 4.25% if you're a borrower, right?
So I believe this statistic holds true. This is the first time in history of Canadian banking where we've seen the interest rate, the Bank of Canada rate, more than double within a four-quarter period, within 1 year.
Minor adjustment is that it's the first time since we've been tracking it.
Yeah.
So call it 30, 40 years, whatever it is, that 1990s or whatever, that they've actually been tracking it. But here's the thing, okay? Is that where we are today is a result of the choices we made in the past. In 2008, when we had some reserves and they said, listen, we've gone through a really bad period of time, we've got to make some accommodations, we've got to stimulate the economy a little bit. That's when they started to bring historically low rates. But we've been sitting in this period of record performance in the economy and jobs growth, et cetera, and the influence has been, we're still at the party, let's see how long we can keep this party going. That's what it's.
Let's let the next guy
deal with it. So when we were into the pandemic, another report that I will reference, another article I will reference, and it's from, let me just see here, it's from the Financial Post. It says, exaggerated pandemic benefits fueled excess demand, driving steeper rate hikes, Scotiabank says. And they could have stopped rates at 2.5% if not for the COVID stimulus supports that were exaggerated. And in the article, it references from the Auditor General that says that there is at least $27.5 billion worth of suspect or suspiciously doled out COVID benefits that likely should not have been handed out.
And that aside,
and they have zero chance of getting them back.
Yeah, and exactly, or even tracking how they.
There's zero. It states right here. The Auditor General said that they have zero hope of getting it back.
No, they just write that off, and you and I and everyone else will pay the cost for that.
So
and are paying the cost.
Let's
for that.
put the equation together.
But all of that money, and we'll move on from this. But the billions that went out. Here's the public in Canada is this wide. And all of them were entitled, or a good portion of them were entitled to that money, when really maybe this many of them actually needed it. But government just does this broadband approach to
it reminded me, Mike, of
there.
what George Bush said during the big crash back in 2008 when he wrote a $1 trillion almost check. It was $750 billion, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Check, and said, just, we can't, you're too big to fail, we can't afford for this crash to happen, take the money, we'll sort it out later.
Yeah.
He said that, like, and I quote,
We'll figure it
and
out
that is
later,
exactly what happened. So, to put the equation all together, my point is this. What would I do if I was leader? Sure, that's an easy thing to say, and that's an easy thing for me to say. And the reality is, I'm not in that position, and I probably am not qualified to be in that position.
Yeah.
Fair? Okay? But the reality is that if we look back at history, and if we study the data, without influence, data is not, I mean, yes, you can manipulate data, but if you actually truly look at raw data, there would have been plenty of indicators to say, you know what? I know politically you'd like to stay in power, and I know politically your electorate would really like this help right now, because instead of telling them to be restrained and instead of telling the public to rein it in and be more conscientious of our spending habits. But not everybody needed a brand new F-150 pickup truck in 2021 and 2022.
No.
Not everybody needed to do the renovation if you couldn't support paying for the renovation.
But is that responsible?
Who's responsible?
No, I say, is that responsible on the fiscally responsible on behalf of the government to just, we're going to throw money. We don't want you to take this money and go and pay down your credit card debt or this. We want you to go to Banana Republic and the local Ford dealership and blow this money so the numbers look good, so the GDP stays high.
The articles
it's
are
like the grandparents giving the kids candy just to quiet them down.
Before bed.
The parents aren't going to do that. They're going to take the tough love approach because they know better. But
we hope.
We need government that behaves more like our parents and than our grandparents.
Okay, so here's where we're going to disagree again.
Go for it.
Okay. I don't know if we need government to do that. Now, Winston Churchill would have said, yes, we need government to do that. Government's in place to take care of people when they're not taking care of themselves. Said nicer.
Well, I think there's a history there.
But I think
not
the public
right
had a responsibility to do better. Just because the money was being handed out,
yeah.
You know, if put it this way, if strict controls were put on that money being handed out, you better believe there would be a lineup of people saying, how dare you treat me like an adolescent and tell me what I'm supposed to do with the money.
If you and I sitting here can figure out, well, we know what's going to happen when all that money goes into the hands of the public. We know where it's headed. How come they couldn't figure it out with all their experts and all their studies and everything else?
Because it wasn't about doing what was right, it was about political influence. And that's my opinion, and someone's going to issue me hate mail, and that's okay.
But
that's okay.
Now here we are as a result of all of this, and in part just because we're at that point in the cycle. Actually, we were traditionally at the point in the cycle where the economy should turn about 5 years ago, but because of low interest rates and artificial stimulation, that 5 years carried into 10 years.
14 years.
Well, it's quite a period of time for sure, and so now we are seeing, and it is a cycle, and that's what everybody out there needs to remember. There's a lot of young people out there who are out there in the workforce, they're working. They don't know what a recession is. They've never been through it. You and I are a little longer in the tooth. You can recall 2007, 2008. You remember, late 90s when we went through. It's a cycle. It's like a storm, and you have to go through it. You can't just come to the front of it and back away. You got to work your way through. We're partway through that storm. I believe within the next year we will be seeing the sun on the other side of that storm. You're looking at me with a smile.
I love it. No, I love it.
And we will get through.
Here's my thoughts on this, and then we do have to go to break, Mike. But the reality is there's going to be an argument that says, but everybody was doing it. And when you talk to the judge or the police officer or your parents or the principal at the school, they will all unanimously say just because everybody was doing it doesn't make it a good idea.
He started it.
He started, and that's the truth. Let's go to break real quick, but when we come back, let's talk about, well, what does the other side of this look like, and what does the forecast look like, and is it going to be bright and sunny? Is it going to be gloomy? Well, we're gonna give you our opinions when
Rainbows and unicorns.
When we come back from this break. Stay with us for more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif on Rogers TV.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we're having an excited conversation here. I'm enjoying this. We're reflecting back on the year 2022. Hindsight is 2022, I believe, is the title for this episode. And you had some more thoughts with regards to our look back on what happened economically, what the government did in response to the pandemic. Well, let's hear what you have to say on this.
Here's the summary of what I'm reading, and like I said, I've always had my own opinion. I do my own homework.
When did that start?
I did. Ask my former wife. But here's the thing. It is important to get outside perspectives, and it is important to check your bias. Okay, but the reality for me is I don't have the privilege or the luxury of having an opinion only. I'm supposed to look at data. I'm supposed to look at math. I'm supposed to look at formula. And you can take some of the best economists in the world, but who's writing the check? Who are they writing the report for? It's the same thing when you're looking at, pharmaceutical studies or studies that are contracted by the Tobacco Council or the NRA, right? You know that there's going to be some inherent bias in there. But when you look back at the data will always say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Practiced restraint even when everybody else is doing something else. And essentially in all of the articles that I'm reading, it's finally coming around, where people are going, that whole thing about what recession? No, we're going in that direction. And here's what it's about. It's about the fact that at the time, the goal was stimulate the economy. At the time, the goal was things are looking good and it's good politically. Let's keep it
use
going.
That weather analogy. The sun is shining. I can't imagine that
it'll
I
ever
could be
set.
standing here getting wet here
We've been at the party. We decided to go not beyond last call. It's now an after party.
We stayed after closing. Yes.
It's an after party, and we're about to have the morning after. And that's exactly what's going on. We're into the hangover phase, and it's going to be, in my opinion, it is going to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's going to be painful.
It was a fun party, and there'll be more parties, but we do need to clean up from this one.
We're overextended. We don't have any more money to hand out. And all of the indicators are saying it's time. We need to rein it back in. Household spending and corporate debt. When other reports are saying people are way over into their lines of credit and credit card. We're pushing towards $2 per dollar of income brought in, $2 of debt for every dollar of income. That is a huge, historically huge amount of debt that people are carrying.
But
and that's globally. That is globally. That's in the UK, that's in the States, that's in Canada, and we need to rein it in.
But rightly or wrongly, if we were at that point, say back in the 70s when you and I were, young kids, our parents would have just totally sank. But there are vehicles, there are support systems, there are mechanisms to allow us to prolong that level of debt at the personal level these days. So that's what gives me a mixed sense of confidence that yes, we're not going to crash and burn. The other side of that is it creates the message that it's okay to carry, that level of debt.
I think that's a horrible message.
It is terrible, but that is what that some will interpret as, it's okay to carry this level of debt. But the reality is we won't see an all-out crash and burn because of this, unless the lenders all called in and demanded payment.
Let me paint a little picture, okay?
Which they won't, because they want to continue it. But I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's the reality.
If we also look at who makes up society in terms of the age, sort of the weighting of certain age brackets in society, we have more seniors that need to be taken care of, but those same seniors have had to tap into using instruments, credit facilities like reverse mortgages and lines of credit. There is less money. I know you will talk about, and I want you to talk about, if you will, the transfer of wealth that you quite rightly refer to, but more people are tapping into debt. The question is, that has been allowed, okay? So people have been able to use their home.
But is it a greater number of people? Yes, it is, but is it a greater percentage of the people? Because our population is growing rampantly.
And we've got more people who have tapped into equity, and home prices are in question, And when you're going for refinance, if you don't have that padding that keeps you in a conventional space where you've got it no less than 20. If you're 60 years old and you've still got a mortgage and that mortgage is 50% of the value of your home or greater, what's your plan to pay it off? You only have a few years left, theoretically, of a working life. And forget working life, let's look at the average life expectancy. What is it for a male? 78 years old, something along those lines, if maybe 75 years old? Well, if you're in your 60s and you're carrying a $500,000 mortgage, you're renting your own home.
Yeah, and we're seeing more of that today than in our parents' generation. But is it going to crash the entire system? I don't believe it will. I believe it's a problem within the system that is there that needs to be addressed.
What is crash the system? I think, what do I know? I know the banks are always going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, your signature's on a document that says if you can't pay it off and you're out, it's insured, or even if it's not insured, they have the right to sell it and you're on the streets, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is this doom and gloom? No, but it's a reality check that says more people have tapped into credit facilities that are unsecured and then credit facilities that are secured to pay off the credit facilities that are unsecured.
That's true.
And as we've all talked about, it is harder for everybody to qualify to get into a home because the price of homes has far outpaced the price of increased wages and household income, right? So the reality is that while there may be a facility in place to manage 2-to-1 debt, which is ridiculous, no business would work that way.
Yeah.
All right. Why should we think that we can? We need to have a strong look inside at our own homes and what is right. And I firmly believe, I'm not all doom and gloom, but I firmly believe it's time to start eating vegetables, not just dessert.
Well, but that education begins in the classroom.
It begins on Rogers TV, Mike.
It's too late for the Gen Xers and millennials who are already deep within those that scenario that you're speaking of. But that aside, not to just toss it away, but just to keep the ball rolling here, we are looking at right now, go into a grocery store. Look at what a chicken that costs $14 to buy. You're going, I'm sure I bought that same chicken back in the spring for $8.
Yeah.
And you can say something similar on just about any consumable item that's out there.
Romaine
right now.
lettuce.
Oh, romaine lettuce. It's just they should have a rent-to-own program for lettuce now. It's ridiculous. And there's a little sidebar, and this is strange. I keep hearing, well, there's the added fuel cost that's driving up grocery prices.
Oh, yeah.
The spokesperson for Loblaw is saying, no, we're not engineering price increases here. There's a term for it. Something inflation. I don't know, but
shrinkflation.
Well,
let's talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, but I recently had to go out to Prince Edward Island for a family situation there. Prince Edward Island, small little island. A lot of their groceries, yes, they have to bring it in by truck from elsewhere in the country. That contributes to the price point. But things that are local there. One of my favorite beers, Gahan Beer, if I may plug a PEI brewery, right there on the island. You go into the beer store there, it's $4.99 for a can of that beer. Go into the liquor store here, it's $2.99. Figure that out. Go to buy potatoes in Prince Edward Island. They're more expensive there than they are 1,700 kilometers away in Barrie, Ontario for that same potato. So that argument just doesn't hold, or it's certainly not being represented in the reality that's out there. So
this is not new, though, because Target, when they came to Canada and failed miserably and face planted because they completely messed up their plan. They were gone within a year, if I remember correctly. Their response to pricing differential from one side of the border to the other side of the border in minutes was, well, it's about buying power. And I'm thinking to myself, the third largest metropolitan area in all of North America is Toronto, and it was at the time. I don't know if it still holds true with Toronto in population, but anyway, at the time, is right here. And you're telling us that the price increase is 50%? And they were justifying it based on, well, it's the cost to bring the goods to market. I was like, no, it's the third largest populated center in all of North America. That is not an argument, right?
We can argue that one too. It's a whole other show. But yeah, so gas prices, grocery prices, your utility prices are up. All of us are realizing the things are tough. So that plays into bringing it back around to real estate and what's happening. For me as a realtor looking ahead, will there be more buyers out there? Will we see more sellers? It's impacting on all sides. I think we're going to see, and this is a good thing within that, a balancing of the market. We're already starting to see that. I believe our prices are down about 5%, average home price. It's 4%, or maybe 4 or 5. It depends where you're drawing your statistics from, but on the whole, just for the Barrie itself.
You're talking about Barrie area, okay.
Barrie itself. I mean, if you look nationally, it's around 10%.
Yeah, I was reading around 8.25%.
8.25%, 8.5%.
Yeah.
Barrie itself, it's done a little better. We have the influence purchasers from the GTA that are still coming here. Did an open house on Sunday, all GTA area buyers coming through. So we're at about 4.5%, 5% price. I think looking through into 2023, and I can't know this for a fact because I don't have that magic wand, but let's say my trick knee as a 22-year realtor tells me that most of the deflation in housing prices that has occurred so far in the last year, I think most of that deflation has happened. Going forward over the next year, I think we will see further decrease in prices, but it won't be another 5%. I think it may be 5 at most, but I think it'll be around 2 or 3%. I can't know for certain. I don't want people making business investment decisions based on what I'm saying. I would add to that, everybody do your homework, check your own stats, talk to your own professionals, and you come to your own conclusion on that. But for me, that's what I'm seeing. And I think going forward, it's going to be a quiet year for real estate. If you're a homeowner and you're locked in for the next 2, 3, 4 years to a mortgage at less than 3%, you don't want to turn around and sell to buy again and have to have a new mortgage at 6%, or maybe even where you'll even qualify for that new mortgage at the higher rate once you factor in that stress test scenario. So I think we're going to see a shortage of product or low inventory for homes. And I think we'll see fewer buyers as a result of prices still being high, the cost of borrowing still being high, and a general fear or anxiety with regards to the recession. But we will get through to the other side of that, and I think when we do, there'll be a pent-up thing, and the cycle begins again.
And on the other side of this break, we'll pick that up and we'll talk about some more predictions. And I actually have a thought. I'm glad you said that, Mike. And let's go into that when we come back in the break. I have an idea, a gut instinct of how we're going to get through that. And we'll see if you like it or not.
We're hearing it here first.
Stay with us. We'll be right back for more of this kind of dialogue with Mike and Arif. That'd be us on Hitting Home. And stay with us. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif. And this has been a fun show so far, Mike. I'm enjoying it. You left us just before we went to the break on your thoughts that we're going to get through it.
Yeah, we'll get through it.
And the reality is, we're going to get through it. We are. How? And what's it going to be like? And is it the end of the world? No, it's not. Anybody who who's short on things to do at home can certainly go back and look at the Rogers archives or take a look at what we've done over the show.
Are they not doing that already?
Well, I would expect so.
Yeah.
But you'll recall for years we've been talking about in every market there is an opportunity, and there really is. And I know that is something that you hold sort of dear and true, that there is always a market, and I believe in that as well.
Yeah.
Whether it's renting, whether it's purchasing for yourself, whether it's purchasing a secondary home, whether it's an investment, whether it's a time to stay put, whether it's a time to renovate. So for me, from a mortgage perspective, are you looking to qualify to buy something new? Are you looking to qualify to switch housing styles?
Yeah.
Are you looking to qualify to renovate? There's always an opportunity, and there really is.
Yeah.
What I want to say though is this, Mike. And I believe in that, and I do believe we will get through, because the world doesn't just end.
Well, because we've been in similar scenarios before, and we always come out the other side.
I just want to take an opportunity, though, Mike, to remind folks that when people's emotions start to dictate their actions, as opposed to being grounded by logic, as opposed to taking a deep breath and thinking about things, I've always said, listen, you've got to, when you're thinking about taking on this investment or this debt or this obligation, great, what are their reasons? Well, sure, there's some emotional reasons attached, et cetera. Don't go and buy the most the guy can sell you today.
No.
When you're walking to the car dealership,
the hard way by some.
What is the best car that I can get you into? Well, today I can handle it, but what about tomorrow?
Yeah.
Right? So, listen, it's great to work towards something.
Yeah.
Do it with confidence, do it with peace of mind. If there's a recession,
but
if you break your leg and you can't go to work, if something happens in your life and you change and you have marital separation, whatever it is, just bear that in mind.
You look at a map, you buy a piece of land and it's next to a river, and there's what they call the 100-year storm mark.
Yeah.
And that is, over the course of 100 years, the highest that river is likely to rise will be to that mark. You can't build on the lower side of that mark. And it's good. You might go and look at that property in the stream and go, I'm putting my house right here, this looks good. You always prepare for the 100-year mark. And that same kind of logic certainly has to apply in making a major investment, be it a house, a car, anything. Don't buy it based on what you can afford today. Base it on the worst case scenarios that may come your way. Because if you get to that point and those worst case scenarios prove themselves, you're going to have far more problems, and you're putting the people around you, your family, into a bad situation.
I like your analogies, Mike. Talk to the people on the Pacific Coast Highway in California. Talk to the people down in Florida who just went through hurricane, and Daytona Beach is gone,
because
literally gone.
Municipalities ignored those.
And we can talk to our premier in Ontario, who's just made a statement that said, thou shall not build inside the floodplain.
Well, there you
when
go.
It comes
I think
to the
you
green
come
belt.
across into California from Nevada, it says California, live for today. I'm not sure.
But I learned something from my dad many years ago when he was still with us, and he exemplified it. And that was that while he could have done all these nice to have and nice to do things, and he did, and we did many. I was a very fortunate kid growing up. We wanted for nothing. We may have wanted for nothing, but the other kids always had the newer, shinier, better, whatever. And that happened a lot.
Well, there's always the example of that kid who's,
absolutely
got a little bit more. But
the reality is that what I've learned now, that I'm probably the same age that I was when I was learning this lesson that he was teaching, was that I would much rather have peace of mind and my health and my sanity. We didn't really talk about mental health back then.
No.
But I think that this is what part of the
is leading to the need to talk about it a lot more.
Absolutely. It was, I will gladly forego that brand new shiny whatever it is that people spent their CERB money on to buy the new F-150. I'll gladly keep mine a year longer. And so what I talked about...
But there's more and more temptations, and they're marketed far more heavily to us today than at any time in the past.
Well, if you look at the soap markers on the windshields of vehicles today compared to 30 years ago, it used to tell you what the price of the vehicle was. Now it tells you what the biweekly payment is over not 36 months, not 48, not 60, 96 months. You can buy this vehicle for weekly payments of $200, right?
You break it down.
Oh, it's ridiculous. If you look at the cost of borrowing, it's 25% and more cost of borrowing for that nice pickup truck.
I got into my last car a year and a half ago at the very tail end of 0.9% financing.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Talked to my dealer. He's a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I said, will we see that again? He says, I can't imagine. He says, I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. He said, but it kept those doors opening and people coming in here buying cars left and right for the last few years.
At what price? And listen, I am not the guy. I know that there will be people who will comment and they'll say it, and I agree with that. I understand it. I don't agree with it. I understand it. Sounds like Chris Rock probably, but I do understand it, that we wanted to keep those doors open. But at what price? And so all I would say to people is, listen, maybe we need to change our habits a little bit. Maybe we need to stagger things out a little bit. Instead of replenishing certain items like that $7 bag of chips that's 40% air every week, maybe deprive ourselves and do it every other week.
Well, there's a lot
Maybe do it once a month.
Yeah.
Maybe just cut back
changing
on some stuff.
some behavior patterns.
Listen, if the manufacturers and the retailers are doing shrinkflation, which means they're charging you the exact same for that box or can or bottle of whatever that item is, but they're filling it less, or they've actually spent the money to retool their plants to create smaller packaging. Smaller packaging, and charge the same price. That's what shrinkflation is. If they're doing it, why aren't we? We should be practicing our own version of shrinkflation, which is restraint.
That's right.
Which is retaining
smaller piece of cake for the kids.
Listen, I'm not saying don't eat the cake. I'm saying maybe restraint.
You know what? The past. I mean, my wife and I have looked at things, and I mean, we're confident we're going to weather the storm. We're going to get through that. But nonetheless, we did take a serious look at where could we rein in a little bit here and different things. And we've decided, well, and let's go to the restaurant a little bit less every month or every, because it was a regular routine, a weekly routine. Well, we'll do a meal out here. And typically the decision was made at the end of our workday as, we connect with each other. Oh, let's just meet up, we'll go here, whatever. And that's ridiculously expensive now. What used to be $40 or $50 and we thought was expensive then not too long ago is, edging up to $100 for a modest meal out for two people. So we're having more meals at home. We've made the decision, instead of like meeting with groups out there at the pub or whatever to have for the social life, is let's have people into the house more, like our parents did, like the grown-ups do, and just have dinner parties. This is something we haven't done in years, and we're getting back into that. In and of itself is not going to create a total savings, but or a significant savings. But you do a number of those things Mike. Back to back.
I think it will.
And just saving things, like we're a throwaway society, and I can remember if the toaster wasn't working, Dad would take it out into the garage, get out the tools. He'd fix the toaster. Nobody does that anymore, and maybe we need to get back.
We're in a throwaway and we're in a drive-through society. And here's the thing, I want to be very mindful. We have a lot of people in our community here who are small business owners. That includes restaurateurs. I'm not anti-restaurateur, absolutely. Just like what it took to go into COVID, and to go into the takeout business and the catering style business, they had to adapt or they didn't survive. And I don't wish that period on them whatsoever.
I'm not saying
I don't.
No.
But with all due respect to the mega corporations,
the rewards a little more.
To the mega corporations, I think we can pick and choose where we apply our dollars, where we spend our dollars. Let's spend them a little bit closer to those who are people just like us to the left and right who are operating and owning these small businesses. I would say I would redirect my dollars there.
Sure.
To your point around whether or not you think it's going to add up to a lot, I promise you, I'll do a study with you off air and maybe I'll bring it on one day on our show. I do this with my clients who are finding themselves in a challenge, whether that's because of loss of job or a sickness or poor habits and choices that led up to where we are today. And we go through an exercise, and it's a fun exercise when you're willing to submit yourself to your own homework and really looking internally. But if you were to track for 30 days, or better yet for 90 days, every single spending habit you have, and if you were just to journal it and diarize it, and we're looking at every takeout coffee you buy, how many times a day, everything you do, and
every takeout place is lined up around the block.
Absolutely,
that has not changed.
If you look, if you're wondering why you've got no money at the end of the month, and if you were to do this exercise, I would say to you, don't change your habits during this exercise. Just diarize it. It'll blow your mind how much money there is. And then in the next segment of this exercise, it's actually calling I am not interested in people depriving. You got to enjoy life. Otherwise, what's the point of it, right? You have to enjoy it to a degree. But then just pulling it back, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for the average client that I had annually. In savings.
And I think people are surprised because on the one hand, as you say, with the automobile dealers, the habit of like showing you your bi-weekly payments. rarely do we personally look beyond our biweekly spending. But when you look over the course of a year, what that coffee once or twice a day at Tim Hortons, what buying your lunch versus making a lunch and bringing it to work, yeah, you quantify that over the course of a year and add them all together, and yes, you were looking at,
Mike, I
many
have
thousands of dollars.
numerous examples of clients that I have sat with during what seemed to be a very difficult time of their life, and it wasn't easy, and I'm not going to downplay it either. And listen, you're where you are today, not because of what happened overnight for most people. Yes, there can be exigent circumstances, but for most, it's over a series of habits and decisions that have been made. We need to unlearn, we need to rethink what we're doing. But I will tell you this exercise that I did with my clients, several of them, the result of 6 months to a year of some good commitment was the difference between losing a home and keeping a home, or never owning a home and owning a home during some really tough times where qualification was difficult. Qualification right now is difficult for anybody. It's 200% more difficult.
For sure.
Basically, right? We have to go to break. Can you? We do.
I can hold.
Hold. Can you?
I've been holding.
Squeeze. Hold that thought. We're going to go to break. I don't know about this show today, folks, but I hope you're enjoying it. We'll be right back on the other side of this break with more of Hitting Home with Mike and Arif.
Welcome back to Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we're having an active dialogue here today covering a lot of things. And just further to what you were talking about before we got taken away to the break, and it's about areas where we can be more responsible, where we need to be more aware, where we're spending, and on the individual purchases, it maybe doesn't seem like a whole lot, but when you step back and you put the chart together and look at those things and add them all up. It's a lot of money per year that we spend. There's areas. I mean, this show is not going to be just about how to think and grow rich and save money here today. But one other thing I wanted to add to that: there's a lot of expenses we have today that your dad, as you referred to, and being a little more fiscally responsible. That generation didn't have these type of, I would call them hidden costs, and those are those monthly or weekly sometimes costs. Once you set up the program, it's taken off our credit card, so we're not seeing it. And that would, with regards to the computer, many of us have 1, 2, 3, or 4 different services, and it used to be you bought a piece of software, you own that piece of software, you've installed it, that was good. Adobe, for example, I use it for doing images and that with regards to my business and my marketing, and owned the software for years. It became redundant. They stopped updating it. You had to buy into the latest one, which is a monthly plan. The software is in the cloud now, and you pay a monthly fee for it. And that is pretty much every service and piece of software on the internet right now. You have to pay a monthly fee for it, and all those things add up. Have a look at what we spend on to watch television at home now.
I do, Mike, I do. And listen, let me be clear. You and I are being sold to every single second of every single day.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reality. We're being sold to. And Mike, that program, that shift is exactly what we were talking about in the last segment, where we were talking about the vehicle used to have the price of the vehicle written on the windshield. Now it has the carrying cost. There's that. The software companies and every other company, which I hate to say it, but whichever streaming service you're using now, it's software. It's software as a service. It is a subscription.
Yep.
And they figured out, much like Microsoft figured out a few years back or a decade or so ago, yes, the cost of entry was prohibitive for some, so let's make it less of a cost of entry. Let's lower that barrier to entry. But don't think that they were doing you any favors, because they took that and they spread it out over everybody who was going to buy in, and that cost of $20 a month or $50 a month or whatever, more than, and by the way, they're designed for obsolescence, right? So that software that you bought, they suddenly put an end date on it. They said, we're no longer, they say it to me today in some of my software, we're no longer supporting this software as of this date.
No more updates.
So now if you want to keep it, you've basically had a taste and you're now hooked. You can draw any reference you want to on this.
Yeah.
You've had a taste, you're hooked, and you're going to pay forever. And as many people as mocked the finance minister a few weeks back when she said, cancel Disney Plus and it'll make all your problems go away, I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Yeah.
The reality is, you're right, Mike. You're absolutely right. We have been trained through excellent marketing to be told what we need, what we can't live without.
And with
and by
regard
the
to
way,
the hardware, we need the latest and the greatest cell phones.
And it's only this much per month. And you add that up, and it is absolutely staggering.
Yeah, you can replace all your appliances with the latest and best kitchen appliances.
Because you need a large iPad on your fridge telling you.
You do.
You know?
I mean, now your fridge has got to tell you you're low on milk, because it saves you having to open the door and look and go, oh, I'm low on milk.
Absolutely.
To have a computer that tells you that, well.
Here's the thing, though. We are busier than ever as humans. So lifestyle and society and the way we are acting, we are busier than ever. And it's interesting because
trying to raise the money to pay for all these services.
We're busier than ever, and we're not keeping up with the actual increase in what would have been projected in terms of household income, and we are keeping up with paying for these little $10 here and $10 there, which are on auto replenishment on your credit card. And by the way, try to find time to sit down and cancel all those things on your credit card. It sounds like we're just ranting and ranting,
It
and
is.
Mike, but here's the reality. If we don't do something, we're going to be in trouble. That's what the forecast is. And by the way, it's taken a little time. I don't know why they waited 6 to 9 months. And here's why, partially. Economists and reporting in the government typically looks at quarterly reports. And what is a quarterly report? It's a look back on the previous 90 days.
Yep.
But you and I can look at today and say, all the data is telling us exactly where we are and where we're trending. So the information typically that you'll read in the papers is behind by about 90 days.
It is.
We're already in a recession. They just haven't told us that yet. We are. So how are we going to keep our homes?
Well, this
because
is what
all
I
of
want
the
to bring
banks,
it around to.
all the banks are finally saying, you know what?
Arif, I got to cut you off here. We promised a silver lining to
That's where I'm going.
our people.
That's where I'm
we
going.
got to bring it to that.
The reality is, if you're on variable versus fixed, because that's what's been sold, because it was sold to us. Remember, I just said that a moment ago. Your carrying cost is 250% what it was just a year ago or 2 years ago. So the reality is, it is tougher. The reality is, we've hit that trigger rate, and by law, in any mortgage in
Can't
Canada,
be higher than 57%.
65%, you must be paying principal towards your mortgage. You must. But what happened is as these rates went up,
They changed the rules.
They kept the payment, but what amount was going towards principal versus what was going to interest now has
on the back end.
breached that trigger rate, gone to the back end. We have to do something about it. Here's the thing, though. I do believe there is a silver lining, and that silver lining is us taking back responsibility and charge for what we're going to do. And it's making a series of small changes, small adaptations to our lifestyle and to our habits to put ourselves back in control. But here's also what's going to happen. You're going to have more people becoming part of the equation, right? Whether it's generationally people staying connected, whether it's parents helping children, whether it's friends helping each other, whether it's partners coming in on board.
And that's the big general picture. It's all good sound advice, and I'd like to dial it down to our region right now with regards to those who are homeowners, who are potentially going to be homeowners in the future, still hopeful of being a homeowner, those who are invested. I'd like to have a dialogue here now that's information for them that maybe offers some hope and, peppered with some caution. With regards to home prices right now in Barrie, Ontario, again, as I said earlier, our national average increase over the last year is higher than the local increase because there are pressures. And when I say I don't think home prices are going to go down much further, it's because of those pressures. And I just want to go through some of those pressures. Certainly, we're right next to the GTA. There's a lot of influence from Toronto buyers are still coming up here to buy. Other thing, new homes, building a new home costs money, and the cost of building that new home has gone up. The builders can't afford to drop their prices 20% right now. They have to.
Not when the ingredients that it takes to build a home is up by 50 to 100%.
So that is going to keep prices in and around where they are. We're not going to see too drastic drop. If anybody's sitting back and saying, oh, I saw this article that says homes are going to drop 50%, that's when I'll buy in. Well, good luck, but it's not going to happen here.
And Mike, let me just speak to that, because that was the idea from the Bank of Canada and the influence of government was, well, we got to bring these prices up. It was actually not because of that. It was because they'd overspent and they needed to figure out how to get some of that money back. Yeah. That is the reality. If you're hearing and believing anything else, you're being lied to or you're lying to yourself. But the reality is they wanted to get prices up, is what they're saying was to cool the market. Here's the challenge to that. You said it yourself. Prices aren't dropping 50%. Prices are only down about 5% locally, 8.25% provincially.
Yeah.
Interest rates and qualifying is up 200%. We're at 4.25% for the benchmark rate, right? So therefore, your qualifying rate is 6.5% to 7%, depending on where you are. Here's the neat part about that. This amount that the price came up down and the amount that the rates came up, neither of those elements has made affording a home or getting into the housing market any more attainable.
And all the more reason why government and the Bank of Canada needs to stay out of it and let nature take its course.
Absolutely.
With regards to the market. And because when they try to artificially tweak it, always ends up creating other problems somewhere else that they hadn't anticipated, and you end up with a bigger mess than. And that lesson never seems to be learned.
So I think the lesson that can be taken away, though, from this, Mike, I do think, as you said, the market's going to cool down, the inventory is going to be less, it's going to be a little bit more calm.
But it's going to be moderate.
And it'll allow people the time to prepare and put their lives in order and make an honest bid and work hard to own a home.
Okay, look over the last 20, 30 years. What we're talking about happening in the next year or two is not a slump market. It is in comparison to the hill we just came over. So by comparison, it looks at, well, this is and there's a lot of realtors.
It's a reduction in hysteria.
Well, it is. And there's a lot of realtors who only came in the last couple of years, have only ever known that type of, blitz market, who are going to struggle. Because they got to get out there, they got to roll up their sleeves, they got to do good old traditional marketing and getting in touch with people.
Hey, guess what? Being a realtor is not easy.
Well, no, and I think it's going to thin the herd a little bit.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people who have come in late to the party, and it's been great for them.
We got to go, but what I would say, Mike, I know it's crazy. This has just flown by, but we have to go. I think if there's a takeaway, though, and hindsight is 2022, let's learn from it as a collective, as individuals and a collective. Get back, leave the hysteria. Recognize when you're being sold to as something that's too good to be true. Get back to the basics, and you will be fine. Mike, we are out of time, though.
We got to go quickly.
It went by way too quickly, but we do thank you for joining us on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
See you soon.